Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Broker Breakdown with myself and Mike. Mike, the weather is finally starting to look like it's going to warm up. I know today, I don't know how it is down in your neck of the woods, but it's been raining on and off here today, but the weather is warming up. So that is a positive sign for anyone that wants to get out, if it's golfing, hiking, or any kind of outdoor activities. Those are all good, positive signs.
It is. It's gonna start warming up, but it's also gonna get into, oh man, arguably one of the worst, maybe month and a half, 2 month periods with all the rain, right? About how it affects claims and stuff like that. So it's gonna be a busy few months in insurance.
Next week, I don't know if you looked at the weather next week, but next week, like, we're supposed to be hitting like 20 degrees some days.
Yeah, those are nice. Those are nice to get outside.
Exactly. But
those are nice.
Kind of like how you just said there, yes, we're kind of going to this spell where, again, I guess with all the rain that we're supposed to be getting in the springtime, that definitely could impact claims. And that's what our topic is going to be today, is the kind of the claim perspective from our end. Again, we say this all the time. We are not adjusters, so we're not really going to go into the depths of like how claims are paid out, how they investigate, all that kind of stuff. We're going to go through claims from the perspective of the broker. So kind of giving people information on kind of how that breaks down from the broker standpoint. Things like how deductibles are paid, how they come into play, how that could impact your insurance moving forward, depending on if you have one claim, if you have multiple claims, things like that. So we just thought that this was going to be important because we've had a lot of clients recently reach out to us and ask these questions, and just a little bit confused on kind of how things are playing out right now. So we definitely wanted to kind of take an episode to really explain it from our end. And we would love to actually have like an adjuster on the show as well from one of the companies that we work with, or even from our internal. So maybe, Mike, that's something we should probably look at as well, because again, we can talk about it from our perspective and then also get an actual claim adjuster on as well to talk it from their perspective.
Yeah, the claims side from where we are in part of that transaction as the middleman or the broker, is we don't hold as much weight as maybe some think we do. We understand maybe the ramifications of a claim, how it affects your policy, things that you should be aware of. I think that's the big thing I wanted to point out in this episode today. But we are not actual adjusters, right? We don't work for the insurance companies. So the way that the back and forth communication happens, if you have a car claim, for example, and you know what the payout's going to be, what were the kilometers, all of those types of questions, James, those always get directed to the adjuster to ensure you're getting, what you feel is the proper payout. And the adjuster is going to go back and forth with you on that. And I'll use a car claim. But the thing that we wanted to highlight today is, just like you just said, how does this impact maybe your policy afterwards? What's something you maybe should put through insurance versus paying out of pocket, for example? The deductibles, having multiple. There's all of these, I don't think they're unknowns, James, but they certainly are questions that are common when people are looking at home and auto insurance. And I think that's going to make for very educational episode today.
Yeah, before we move on, I do want to kind of make a point that you brought up as well, that we don't work for the insurance companies. We represent them, but we don't work for them. So in the event of a claim like something happening, we are there to work for our clients. Like, there have been times where I've seen the adjuster and the client kind of go back and forth for like a few weeks or a month or whatever it is. And sometimes, as the broker or as the agent, we sometimes have to get involved. Like, there are times where I'm like, I have to fight for my client a little bit more because the insurance company might not be giving a suitable payout or whatever it might be, or solution to something, right? So again, there are ways that we can step in, but again, where it's not like we control the outcome of claims, but again, we can step in a little bit for our clients if need be.
Yeah, and you know what? That brings up a good point. It's more from the service side. I know one of the common complaints since COVID that I've heard from people is, they do submit that claim and it just seems like it's at a standstill, James, with respect to like, hearing back from maybe the auto body shop on what the damage are looking like, or being able to get parts or whatever it might be. That is one area that we can very slightly get involved in, and by basically just calling the company, kind of being that middleman and saying, "Hey guys, do we have an update? Is there anything we can do to kind of expedite this process?" But that's about the extent of it. So yeah, I just wanted to point that out as well, because I know that ever since COVID kind of started, I feel personally that there's been a heavy burden on claims adjusters and the service side of claims just being that little bit slower, James. And I think it's just because of labor shortages and things that we've talked about in previous episodes, and what they're kind of combating every
Yeah,
day.
we've seen the timing and the processing and all that kind of stuff very very widely changed since kind of this whole pandemic has started. Um, Things weren't perfect before. Things are definitely not perfect now. And again, companies go through these, and I always like kind of use the analogy of a roller coaster. There's times where you're at an all time high. You couldn't get any better. You're like I said, everything's running smoothly. Then you hit those little hills, and you start coming down a bit, and you get to rock bottom, and people might be leaving the company. People are being poached, go to other companies, that kind of stuff, leaving the industry, whatever it might be. So there are the roller coaster effects in insurance. And like I said, it's never perfect, but you do get those times where you might go through a 3 to 6 month period where company A is so hot. And then after that, they become so cold, and then company B becomes so hot, right? So there's all those roller coaster effects, even in the claims side of things, where if things are taking a little bit longer, I can kind of nudge them and be like, "Hey, you know what? Like, what's going on here? Like, why is this taking 3 months or whatever it might be instead of taking like 3 weeks?" Right? So there are ways that we can help. So don't just think that you're just on your own when you're putting a claim through. We are there to obviously help and mitigate if we need to.
Well, and the one big thing that I was just thinking about during that piece is that we can be used as those advocates on maybe you don't get not the answer you're looking for, but maybe it's like, "Hey Mike, I got this back from the adjuster, but just not sure like how does that going to entail moving forward?" Because we have a better idea of what's going to happen moving forward on that, like, after a claim happens. And maybe answer some of those questions. So I think the broker from a claims perspective, James, is I mean, invaluable. Like we are very, 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 you know, um, knowledgeable when it comes to like, what the policy is looking like and how that's going to affect things and what makes most sense, and just kind of putting peace of mind in clients, to know that we're looking after them in a sense as best as we can. And I think that I've found personally, people have kind of felt like they're, calling the insurance company, and then it's just they're on their own with the adjusters at that point. It's just, go through them, and whatever they say is kind of how it goes, right? And that's certainly not the case.
Exactly. But kind of getting into the whole claim situation, I think this is one that I want to really kind of slam home to people, is that especially with home, well, really you can't really deal with this on the home side of things, but on auto sides, and might not be really an insurance thing, but maybe just like a safety thing or in general. But if you're involved in an accident on the road and your vehicle is drivable, please get off the road. I don't understand why so many people like will get into little fender benders and their vehicles are like perfectly able to be driven, and they just sit there, and not only do they cause traffic jams, but they put themselves in a situation where their safety is now on the line. Like, why would you be on the road and trying to deal with like an accident when you could just pull off into a parking lot or off to the side of the road or on the shoulder or whatever and just deal with it there? I don't ever get that.
You know what? So I was thinking about that recently, but then I thought about part of the counterpoint to say, like, why would you? And I think it's just societal trends where people are willing to kind of, in essence, lie about what happened in an accident. So I'll use that example, right? A small little fender bender. But me and you both know there is going to be fault given in that accident in one way or another. And if you pull into a parking lot, I mean, one could argue that now, without photos or video proof, it's a he said, she said about who hit who. And I know, people would say, well, if it's from behind, of course, it's going to show damage, and that's pretty true. But I think that's why people would want to do it. It's like, hey, I want to show how I was hit, for example, and so staying in that position is maybe something they've been told by relatives or coworkers or friends. I don't really know, but that's kind of where my mind went on that.
Yeah, like in the world that we live in today with all the technology and stuff, yes, like the instant that you get hit, yeah, get out of your car, look at the damage, take pictures and whatnot. But even from the insurance standpoint, like there are ways that they can basically reenact how that damage is caused. Like it's not like they just look at it and they go, "Oh, well, you know what? Car A hit car B." Like there's ways that they can reenact how damage is caused, right? Like how skid marks on the road are caused, if there's skid marks, how the damage of the angle of the damage and how like certain fenders might be bent in properly. But again,
Yeah, right.
like from a consumer standpoint, if you're in an accident, yes, get out, kind of make sure everyone's okay, take pictures, and then if you can, just get off to like a parking lot or the side of the road, because at the end of the day, like I said, not only are you causing traffic, but now you're also putting yourself in danger where if someone else isn't paying attention, doesn't know that someone else is on the road out of their vehicle, again, I know it's very, very unlikely, but you could still get hit by another vehicle and then, again, injured even more or even possibly killed. So I would just say, like, personally, and this happened to me actually, I'll give you my personal story. So a few years ago, I was T-boned. And my car actually almost flipped, the truck that I was driving at the time. And my car probably wasn't drivable because my one tire like exploded. It was like literally on a rim, but there was a lot of damage. So like I kind of like got out, kind of like figured myself out because I was pretty like in shock at the time because like I thought I was flipping my car at the time. Then
Right.
I went over to the other party and I was like, "Is everyone okay?" All that kind of stuff. Like kind of gave them a few not so kind words of how they didn't see a big truck coming down the road. But and then like instantly after that, I literally pulled it into the parking lot that was right there, and we kind of went about the claim, the whole like kind of situation of getting the
Like
police called,
exchanging the
and
info and
yeah,
everything.
exactly. So um yeah, like I said, just from a personal side, like I probably shouldn't have driven my vehicle off because there was a lot of damage to it, but I still just got off the road because one, it was at night too. So again, I didn't want to be out on the road and not people see me because I think I had a black coat on, like a dress coat on, and because at that time I dressed more like business for the office that I was working at. So I believe I was in all black basically that day, other than like my shirt. So I just wanted to get off the road, just so again, like we were just in more of a safe area, so we could basically get this all dealt with.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, and it happened, right? Accidents do happen. And you know what? That leads kind of into a thing that we've chatted about before, but it's perfect for this part because it was a car accident. But that auto insurance in Ontario, I know that there has been the common term thrown around, like, quote, no fault insurance, kind of end quote. But James, I think there's a misconception that auto insurance, there is no fault. And I wanted to quickly take a minute to decipher what that means to the average, auto insured driver, because there is fault in accidents, whether it's single, whether it's multi. Fault just comes after the fact with respect to like how it affects an insurance policy, right? And a lot of people don't necessarily know that. So I think what people do need to know is that the kind of term no fault insurance, and the reason it was brought around was that the individual, let's just use two vehicles as an example that are involved in an accident. The idea was that the insurance companies would take care of their respected client and then kind of go after each other behind the scenes to recoup the damages for that loss. So the idea is that my car A hits car B. Car A is at fault for those damages. Car A goes through their insurance, to usually under collision, if they have it, to pay that out because they're at fault. Car B was not at fault, goes through their insurance, and their own insurance companies take care of their own clients as fast as possible. So it's not about getting the money from the other person's insurance company to pay for those damages. You're both looked after behind the scenes by your respected insurance company. And then you're kind of done. The insurance companies will then kind of go after each other for saying, hey, there was $5,000 in damage. We both know your client's at fault. Pay me back, sort of thing. That was the premise, James, behind it. And I think that's still the idea right now about what it is. But how to segue that in, and I'll let you go into that, but there's still fault and accidents from the client perspective. That's just how they're paid out.
Yeah, and it was just really a way to basically shave some time off of how long claims took back in like the 80s and 90s. Like it was taking way too long to then go through core, figure out who was at fault, getting the other insurance companies to pay for both claims. It didn't make sense. So now, realistically, how I like to explain it is your insurance takes care of your vehicle, the other party's insurance takes care of their own vehicle. And then, I guess, like you were saying, behind the scenes, yes, like they deem fault, and then at that time they can go after each other. But for the sake of time and not to waste people's time, it just vehicles get fixed or homes get fixed, and they just go about their time, right? So I think it was a very big change when it first came around, and I think the older generation kind of gets it more confused. Like the older clients I talked to, because they kind of were around for both models, I would say, they do still get confused that they ask, oh, well, like who's going to take care of, like, I don't want to put it through my insurance because like they were at fault, right? But unfortunately, that's how it works. Your insurance takes care of yours, their insurance takes care of theirs. And then at the end of the day, if the two insurance companies want to battle it out in court or whatever it might be to basically get that payment back, then they can do that. But to save time, they don't. They just take care of it and they go about their days.
Yeah, and there's another aspect that's on top of that. So that's really talking about the damages to the vehicle specifically. So damages to repair those vehicles. There is still obviously after that point, there's the possibility for the lawsuit side for injuries sustained in those accidents or loss of income or a whole slew of different things that more of the legal side looks after, which is what your liability coverage is for, right? Damages to other people, and that liability protection is there more commonly, the 1 or 2 or upwards of 5 million, depending on your policy, is there to protect you from those legal actions that you did to a wronged party. So that's sort of after the fact too, and that's a much longer drawn out process. But the thing that I wanted to get across in the no fault thing is that there is still fault in accidents. People need to be aware of that. If you hit somebody from behind, there is a higher likelihood that, you're going to be deemed at fault for that accident. And, that's going to affect your policy. So how does that affect things moving forward is usually the next question that clients would ask, James, as well, right? So I got involved in this accident. Everything has now been dealt with, but what's going to happen to my insurance policy? So there's a few things I definitely wanted to highlight, one of which is, and let's stay on the car side for the moment, when you have that claim and it's all finalized, you typically then have an at-fault accident on your record. That accident stays with you for X number of years, and it's hard to generalize because every company has kind of changed the ways they've viewed claims, and some of our partners go back farther than others. I would say, generally speaking, 6 years for the higher risk companies and some of the standard market companies is still very, very common for claims. So they'll basically be on your record for, and I mean on your record, they come off slowly as the years get older, so it affects it less. But they're usually on there for a period of 6 years. Some go up to 9, some are even longer than that as well, depending on the market. But that's the big thing first I wanted to say, James, is when that claim happens, how is it going to impact your policy? And those years are impactful in what determines your price for the coming years.
The one thing I really wanted to touch point on, and I just kind of let you talk because you were putting up really good points, but I want to kind of backtrack a little bit. I want to make this very, very important to people when they're looking at, especially at auto insurance, because this is specifically pertaining to auto insurance. Please, 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 please review your accident benefits, because I have seen in the last month on all these groups that I'm in, on all kind of social media, that people are all up in arms about how insurance companies aren't paying out for injuries and coverages that are through accident benefits. But I don't ever comment because I really don't want to open up that can of worms. But I always kind of think, one, do you even know like what your accident benefits are? And again, that could be from the standpoint of, did the broker or agent even like explain to you like what they are? And two, did you even like look yourself and kind of see like what are these? Like what happens if this happens? But they're so important. And again, like I know that we kind of just look at them, they're like, oh, well, we get the minimum like requirements, so that's going to be enough. But again, there are times where like these things could be like lifelong injuries that you might have to go your whole life having if it's a substantial injury that you might have from an accident. So you want to make sure, like, okay, like income replacement, is that going to be enough to basically keep me from not having to work for however long I'm injured? If I die, am I okay giving only this amount of money to family members in the event of an accident? Like I find they're so important, but people really just don't look at them, Mike. And then, like I said, I've seen so many recently that people are like, oh, my insurance company didn't pay me this and didn't pay me that. And it's like, well, did you even look at the accident benefits and make, or, and again, I don't want to put it all on the client, but like, did your broker even explain to you what accident benefits are and that you can increase those limits if you'd like to, or at least give you other options like life insurance or benefits or anything like that? Were those options even given to you or explained to you at the time of you signing this up? So again, there is
Yeah.
obviously the responsibility on the broker side, but there also is the responsibility on the client side too, to maybe ask those questions and understand a little bit more about their policy. Because again, accident benefits is a massive portion. Like once you get the documents, like they're a huge portion. Like they almost take up like half a page, Mike. So it's not like you can really miss those big pieces of information on the documents. But again, like Mike, how many times do you hear from clients, oh, did you get your renewal or did you get your documents? Yeah, I just threw them out.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people, put in the filing cabinet sort of thing, wait for the next year. And it really depends on, did it go up or down, right? For the average person, to do a review. At least I think anyways, the
Yeah.
average person doesn't always really look at it that in depth, but the part of that is just, making sure you want to be covered in the event of a claim, right? I mean, you buy an insurance policy to ultimately protect yourself and your interests if something happens in a specific claim example. So it's good just to know what type of claim examples are maybe more common, but also what things would you be concerned about or should you be concerned about?
Yeah, like I just don't ever understand like why people are just so like focused on the collision and like the comp and liability. But like I understand like not every accident is going to have to use their accident benefits, but the problem is the time that they do, they're so important because you basically get X amount of money, and once you get that X amount of money hit, you're cut off. Like you don't have any more coverage after that. But I don't know why, just recently I've been seeing so much of it that people are like, and that's what I find too. You get on social media and you kind of swing the story like the wrong way. Oh, the insurance companies are so bad. But it's like, are they really bad, or did your broker just not do their job properly, or did you just kind of not read what you're actually covered for, and now you're like not taking responsibility for it and blaming someone else just because it's easy, and the insurance companies already have a bad name as it is, so it's easy just to basically put the blame on them, and everyone's going to agree with you that insurance companies are bad. So
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
it's
right.
definitely a point I wanted to bring up because, like I said, that is a like it could possibly be a massive topic when it comes to a claim if we have to get into that coverages especially.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's a great point. That's a great point. Um, the other thing that I wanted to touch base on in that exact same realm was kind of how a deductible, James, affects your claim payout and really what it's there for. Because I think that's a huge talking point, especially for home and auto
And I still,
insurance.
you know what's funny? I still get so many people that might be insured for 30, 40, 50 years. And I talk to them about a deductible and they're like, I don't even know what that is. And it's like, oh. And it's like, I have to explain to them something that we think in the industry is just common knowledge. But like, there are literally some people that have no idea what a deductible is.
Well,
So
yeah, yeah. Well, basically, it's. I think there's a common viewpoint though that you buy your policy off whoever, representative or whoever you've gotten it from, that they're the ones that should be kind of explaining that to you.
100%. That should be one of the most important question or topics that you have as a broker or agent that you should be bringing up because again, deductibles can change too, and there's all these rules behind it that can change it. Again, people a higher deductible usually means less premium, um, and again, also depending on the value of the vehicle, there are some companies that might say, "Oh, you know what? For a vehicle valued at this amount or higher, we have to have at least this deductible or higher on a vehicle or on a home or anything like that, right?" But basically, what a deductible is basically in the event of a claim, you basically pay whatever the deductible is. So most commonly, deductibles are usually at least a 500 or 1,000, depending on what product it is. Homes are usually 1,000, and then cars is usually 5 or 1,000 as well. But basically, you pay the deductible. So if it's either 500 or $1,000, and then the insurance company will pay whatever the rest of the damages are. So basically, if the damages are $10,000 and your deductible is $500, you basically will pay the $500, and the insurance company will pay the additional $9,500. In the event of it being, let's say you go through the whole process and it's deemed not at fault, most companies will actually waive your deductible in that case if you're not at fault. Again, that's going to be a very company base. And if they're going to waive it, but usually 9 times out of 10, if you're not at fault, the insurance company will just waive it and say, Mike, we're not even going to charge you for it because you weren't at fault for this accident.
Right. Right. Yeah, there's an aspect too of the deductible that I think is really important because it really determines what type of claim you might want to submit through insurance. And I say that because, let's say you have, $800 for a windshield or $900 for a windshield. If your deductible is at $1,000, meaning you have to pay the first 1,000, the insurance company pays the remainder. At that point, it is not advantageous to put a comp claim in because you're not going to get any money paid out, right? You're going to get
You're
you're basically
spending more money technically.
yeah, you're on the hook regardless. Whereas the lower deductible, there's always going to be pros and cons. The pros being you have more options available to submit a claim. For example, that windshield. So if it's 500 and it's a $500 deductible, you have $900 in damage. It might be still advantageous to put that through if you want those couple $100 from insurance. And a lot of people that are tighter would say, yeah, I want to put through, a claim for that. That's always the pro side, is it gives you more options. The con side, usually the only real con to that is you're going to pay a little bit more on your monthly, car insurance premiums. What that number is not static. I can't just tell you it's $10 extra a month because it's going to vary by company, by car, by person. But you're typically going to pay a little bit more to have the luxury of the lower deductible. That's really what it comes down
But
to.
it's not like a significant change. Like realistically, when I have clients that ask me to change their deductible, it's not like their insurance gets cut in half because we increase their deductible from $5 to $1,000 though.
Yeah, right. And I guess the type of vehicle too warrants that, right? I've seen lots of examples where if a vehicle is, 60, 70, 80 grand, $500 deductible, you might, if you, let's say you have it for comp and collision together, you might end up paying, upwards of $20 or $30 a month more, depending on the value of the vehicle, because obviously the higher deductible, you're paying that a little more out of pocket as well. So there's a lot of different scenarios. There's definitely no right or wrong answer, but knowing the fact that a deductible applies to certain situations is really important to know, because that impacts, what you're going to want to put through, if anything. Also, is that claim a rateable claim? Is it non-rateable? There's that whole aspect as well, depending on what type of damage you've incurred.
And the fault as well, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. I think we might have done an episode earlier where we talked about the difference between comprehensive and collision, and what those cover. That's certainly not for today, but what you do need to realize and recognize is that there is typically a deductible in a lot of incidents, unless someone hits you specifically and they're identified. Your deductible is typically waived, but in a lot of regular cases where it's a comprehensive claim, or it's something like a collision where you're at fault, or even, James, a common one, as I'm thinking about this, is hit and run damage, where that other party that did the damage to your car is not identified. You still, as a client, pay a deductible because nobody else is there to take that on.
Which is a great point.
Because people don't necessarily know that, right? If you have damage in a parking lot and you have $1,000 deductible,
actually,
right?
I'm going to bring up the parking lot thing in a second.
Yeah, go right into that then, because that's a huge talking point and a very common example that we see all the time.
Yeah, because parking lots are very, very hard to determine who's actually at fault for things. So parking lots, and I tell all my clients this, try to avoid getting in any damage or accidents in parking lots, because 9 times out of 10, insurance companies will basically just do a 50-50 split because they can't really determine it in a parking lot. Because your car could be parked and someone swings their door and hits your vehicle, but then it comes into play. Okay, well, were you parked properly? Were you within the lines? There's all this kind of stuff. I had a client recently that had that happen, where someone swung and hit his door, and like, I'll be honest, from the pictures I could barely see the damage. But I said to him, you know what? Like, personally, I don't see a reason for you to claim this, because one, there's really no damage to your vehicle. Like, there might be a little bit of a scuff that you can basically just wipe off with a cloth or even polish it out. But like, the insurance companies, it's so hard to deem fault in a parking lot. So unless there's like a massive, massive like damage where the car is like undrivable, or like, obviously there's massive damage to a vehicle, I would just say avoid parking lots and getting into damages in parking lots, because they're such a nightmare to deal with from a claims perspective to actually deem who's at fault for those.
Yeah, there's definitely cases too where, there's definitely more clear-cut cases that I've seen in the past where it's like you're coming out of a specific spot, and someone's got like the lane, but because it's not the same as the roads, there's varying opinions on if you're both, like you said, James, both 50-50 versus someone, you're in a parked car, for example, and someone backs into you when you're parked 100%. And I've seen those go certain ways as well. That's always case by case. But the one thing that is common is where you go into a store, somebody comes out and you've noticed damage and they've driven off. And this is what I wanted to quickly say, was that if you have a significant door ding, and it's like, it's going to cost an entire panel of your car, and you're looking at like, $1,000 deductible, if the damage doesn't meet that, it's always, recommended, give us a call first as your broker. We can tell you how that would be, kind of looked at as well, right? Because in a situation like that, if you go through your insurance company to repair those damages, but the other person wasn't identified, you will be paying that deductible, right? It's not that's 100% not looked at as that, because there's no way for them to properly deem, or basically get the money back. Ultimately, how does the insurance company recoup those funds if somebody hasn't been identified? And that the reason that's like that is to avoid fraud cases, where you can just go anywhere and just say, hey, I got $5,000 in damage, I want this repaired. And there's no repercussion for you to kind of have that. That's why that system was implemented like that.
Yep, 100%.
Because if you don't pay a deductible in those cases, and basically you can get, almost free damage with no deductible and no fault. Think about how many people in general would just be putting damages through saying somebody hit them and left, right? That's kind of the
Exactly.
reason that was implemented.
100%. But let's kind of move on to the home side, because homes are a little bit different when it comes to claims, because again, it's not like a home can hit a home and we have to deal with two parties, Mike. It's really just the owner of that home or property is really the one that has to make those claims. So do you want to kind of talk about a little bit of why homes and properties, the claims are a little bit different than what we see on the auto side?
Yeah, and this goes back just to who's at fault for it, and the reality of home insurance is there typically is not a fault determination like there is for auto insurance. So if you have damage to your house, and I actually remember a case or a claim a few years back where neighboring houses, James, one person had a fire. And as a result, the neighbor who was, I think it was about 10 feet away, the fire was significant enough where they actually had siding that was completely, you know, destroyed as a result, and a little bit further damage to some smoke damage and some stuff to their brick. But there wasn't a lot, but it was definitely enough damage where they wanted to submit it, through insurance. They technically speaking, if you're the person in that house with the siding that's been damaged from your neighbor's fire, you're still going to have to put that through your own home insurance policy in order to get that repaired. And it is going to be a claim on your home insurance kind of record, as we called it. And the reason is that even though that person had a fire next door, it it wasn't done, neglectfully. It wasn't done in a negligent manner to burn your house at all. It was probably a very unfortunate event. And that's typically how home insurance is viewed, is if you have resulting damage to yours from theirs, they're going through their own home insurance policy, James, to pay for that. You're probably going to have to do the same for those unfortunate damages. And yes, they're very unfortunate, but the reality is that's how our system works with insurance. There's always going to be the avenue on, property damage and personal injury from a lawsuit perspective, which is someone's right as well. However, in that specific sudden moment, if you want your siding repaired, it's the terrace side of your house, you will go through your own home insurance. And this is what I kind of wanted to finalize. And you will be paying, whatever your home insurance policy deductible is, right? That's the kind of, as muddy as that is, that's the way that kind of situation would unfold.
But they do have now, like we've been seeing a lot of companies kind of introduce this kind of claims protection, is what they call it, on homes now too. So kind of like on the auto side of things where you have claim forgiveness, they now have basic claim protection on homes. So it does actually protect you against your first claim if you make it one against your home.
Yeah, that's a great point. Claims forgiveness is usually available, I say normally, with majority of your standard market home insurance companies right now, and it works the same way as your auto. So it helps for two reasons. One, you're not going to see that claims-free discount that's very prominent on home insurance be removed the following year. So ultimately, you're not going to see like that 10 or 15 or 20% increase on your home insurance for submitting that claim. But the other thing is that it kind of works the same way, where it protects that discount, and it also is like that claims forgiveness. Now, James, like anything, if you were to have multiple property claims in, a given period of time, there's probably going to be other, potential things that come into play, which, are you non-renewed in a couple of years? Do you have two or three in a certain period of time? Were they water or fire losses? There's a lot of dynamics that go in behind the scenes that we can help answer those questions as brokers. But just to advocate that claims forgiveness on your home insurance for, $20 to $50 a year, whatever it might be, is well worth the money.
So kind of piggybacking on what you just said there, we know, but is there repercussions to possibly having too many claims in like a certain period of time, like either on the auto or home side? Like, are you basically going to be limited to like what options you're going to have if you basically put in like three or four auto claims or three or four home insurance claims within like a 3-year span?
Oh yeah, 100%. I know it's not always, people get super upset saying I've paid for insurance for 25 or 30 years, never had to use it, and then when I use it, it's looked at as a negative. Unfortunately, if that's still kind of the reality, you have insurance for the larger things in life, James. We've talked about this before, right? Where depending on the severity and what the damages are, does it make sense to do it yourself or does it make sense to go through the insurance company? The reality is a couple of claims in a short period of time is going to be harder for you to get competitive rates and or eligibility with some of those, top um, top options. So you shrink the pool of companies that you can get, competitive prices with a couple of claims in a few years, and that goes for both home and auto. Specifically talking home, if you have a couple of claims within a couple of years, regardless of the type, it could be theft, fire, water. It's going to go against you a lot harder, and it's going to be very hard to get competitive pricing.
And realistically, they're only doing that because they want to basically stop the petty little $2,000 claims on homes. Again, a home is probably your biggest investment you're ever going to make, but I've seen clients all the time that will put these petty little $2,000, $3,000 claims through on the home, and I just don't understand because it impacts them so much long term. But again, they're not like their broker or agent, whoever they're dealing with, might not be disclosing that to them and not possibly doing what's best for them in the long term. Short term, yeah,
Yeah.
because everything's fixed, everything's done, all this looks great. But long term, a company might look at you and go, you know what, we don't want to, we can't insure this because you've put in three, four, five little claims in, and we can't accept this anymore. So short
Well, it
term,
shows it
great,
shows the frequency, right? It's the frequency
exactly.
aspect. Um, and you know what? There's lots of examples where it makes sense. There's no, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. It's really for the client experience. Some people might not have the funds to be able to pay for it out of pocket, so it makes sense to put it through. And by all means, that's your right. The big thing that today's episode was about was understanding that, with every potential claim you want to put through, what are the repercussions on your deductible? How does it affect your insurance moving forward? And you make a good point, James. If you have, a bundle of shingles that's blown off in a storm, I mean, my answer, I'll say 9 out of 10 times, just to have that one out there, is going to be, a relative, family member, maybe a handyman that you have to help, put those back on, get the roof in great repair again, but not putting it through insurance because of the, how it affects things. But I'll always have that conversation with someone on an experience and then say, hey, this is what's gone on. This is what's going to do. Because ultimately, James, I don't feel that we're the ones that tell you to put it in. I just want to give you as much info as possible so you know how it impacts things, right? That's I think the broker advantage.
Yeah, we're going to give our knowledge and our opinion and our expertise. And at the end of the day, the client's the client. They have to make that decision. We're not forcing you to do one or the other. At the end of the day, it's your policy, it's your home, it's your vehicle, it's whatever it is. You got to make that decision if you're going to put it through, right? And at the end of the day, we'll be there to give you the knowledge and the education, the expertise behind it. And if you still want to put something through or you don't want to put something through, then that's what we'll have as the client. That's your right and privilege to be able to do that, right? So,
Exactly. And that's a great point. It is always your right to say, Mike, I had a $500 deductible. I had my $1,000 barbecue stolen on a property insurance claim, and that's an example I use all the time. I still want to go through insurance to do that, and I will 100% advocate and say, sure, if you want to do it, just know these this is what happens, and this is what you're looking at moving forward, blah blah blah. But if you say, I want to put it through, I want that $500 extra, by all means, I'll help facilitate with you as much as maybe in the back of my mind it might not be the best, but we'll always have that conversation.
exactly. But yeah, just kind of wrapping things up, I think my final point that I want to make is if you're unsure, just ask for advice. There's no right or wrong answer if you just basically pick up the call and go, "Hey James, you know what? I had a question about this. Do you have a few minutes? Let's chat about it." Like there is no client that I'm going to say no. sorry, Mike, I don't have 5 minutes for you to kind of review something, so we can kind of clarify things before you make a decision, right? So I would just
Yes.
say, if you ever have questions about something like that, and it doesn't matter if it's a claim question, if it's a policy question, if it's a coverage question, just ask for advice. Call your broker, email them, whatever you want to do, and just say, you know what, I had this quick question. Can we review it together? And any good broker or agent will be like, yeah, no problem. Let's chat about it, and we can kind of clarify it together, so you are more aware of how that actually breaks down, or how the like what actually is covered in that case. So that would be my kind of
Yes.
takeaway point.
Yeah, yeah. 100%. The industry in general, I think the actual client facing people, whether you're on the broker channel or the direct agent channel, giving that education to clients is what builds that trust between the two of you, and giving proper advice on um, just what options are available or how things will look after is super, super important, right? Because if anybody says, this is what you have to do because I tell you so, or this is what you should do, given that example, and then you're forced, kind of almost felt forced to do it, and then the outcome is not what you expected because of maybe transparency, James, that's a big thing. That's going to leave a bad taste in that person's mouth. And they're more than likely going to just leave for somebody else the following year, anyways. So the claims process is super, super important to, because you're at that point, you're actually putting that trust factor and that policy into play, into force. That's really what you've bought in when you bought it anyways, right? So if you can't be there when someone needs to utilize that, I think that separates a lot of different people in the industry.
Exactly.
That would be my
Exactly.
final port, is just making sure you have the right person looking after your stuff and you have a better understanding about what scenarios you might want to put in and how it impacts things. And then there's just more of that. You're on the same page, clients and representatives.
Couldn't have ended it better. But moving on to next week. So next week we're actually going to have another guest on the show. His name's Aleem. He's a real estate agent out in Toronto. So he's going to come on. He's going to talk about kind of like what the market's looking like, what's been going on in the real estate world really in the last few years. And yeah, I'm just really excited to have him on, because again, that's kind of another different industry that we haven't had on before, is a real estate agent.
Yeah, yeah, that's going to be super exciting. I mean, there's a lot of things going to be coming on the pipeline, I feel, in the next few months with real estate, especially with interest rates and coming into spring and summer when houses are typically back on the market. So that'll be a great episode.
Yes, I'm looking forward to that. But again, thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you guys follow and subscribe. We post every Tuesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So make sure you guys don't miss any episodes of the Broker Breakdown. But we'll catch you guys next week.